Okay, so first of all, women aren't just like dickless men. We're not just like men plus different hormones. Like we are our own type of human being. There's two types. There's male and there's female. And so even if you go and have the surgery and go on all of these hormones, you haven't actually changed sex. You've just a man who has cut off body parts, added some cosmetic procedures in, and are taking synthetic hormones. That's all you actually are doing. And it's just shameful that any sort of legal institutions have validated a delusion that means that you change sex, because you don't. I mean, a simple DNA test will prove that individual is still a male.
Welcome to Conversations with me, Peter Boghossian. Today I have a conversation with Australian Sal Grover. Sal is the founder and CEO of Giggles, a female social network. We have a very candid conversation about a wide range of topics, feminism and women's issues, among other things. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Thank you. Well, thanks for talking to me today, because you're someone I've wanted to talk to for a long time. And I find your story and the things that you've been talking about to be fascinating. So you said you're an open book, so I can ask you any question, and you can not answer the question if you want. How's that as a good rule?
Yeah. Perfect.
So do you think that you being very attractive is one of the reasons why you've garnered, why people don't like you in the trans community? Because you actually look like a beautiful woman. Like, do you think that is one of the reasons for driving the animus?
I've literally never been asked that before. I've never even thought about that. No, not at all. No, because I think that it's the words that all of the women are saying that people have a problem with. And the fact that we exist as women. And I think that there actually may be some more animosity towards women who maybe present themselves in a more masculine way, because they're still women and we can still tell. And we know that. So I think that, the fact that no woman has to put in any effort to be a woman, I think, is where some of the animosity comes to. And I mean, even on the note of, like, say a woman being stereotypically attractive, or what, society would deem attractive in any way, lots of really beautiful women have spoken out about this, and especially in the last few years, and said, like, it doesn't necessarily help you. It doesn't get you treated any better, that's for sure. It doesn't get you taken seriously. It doesn't get you respect. It can help in superficial ways, maybe only. So, no, I mean, I don't spend my life thinking about it, really.
So you don't think that one's attractiveness would make others who are not attractive harbor a kind of animosity against them? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking. I'm just.
Obviously, there's jealousy and things that happen in sort of the wider society. But I think if you were talking strictly about like gender ideology and its impact that it's having on women, no, I don't think so at all.
So if you were to summarize, okay, so two things. What do you think what do you think people who consider you their ideological enemy, what do you think those people think about the stances you hold? Like, if I found someone who literally hated you and I said, okay, what does Sal believe? What would they say?
I think they would say that I think trans people don't exist, that I want there to be some kind of trans genocide, that I hate trans people, and it's probably, I don't even think they think even beyond that, they don't really have much. I don't think that they'd ever listen to a word I've said.
For sure.
Other than I've been critical, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's a feature of the ideology, not a bug. So given that that's what they believe, what do you believe about trans people? Like in the same, with brevity in mind.
Mm-hmm. So I'll even sort of take it into the context of what I think they think I believe. And so the first thing would be that they would say that I don't believe that trans people exist. Now, obviously, all human beings exist. They exist in the exact same way that I exist or you exist. Every person exists. Do I believe that transgenderism is a real biological, scientific concept based in reality? No, I don't. I do agree that there is obviously a condition called gender dysphoria, but it's appearing more and more that we're not dealing with that. That's not the actual condition that we're dealing with 99.9% of the time. I would also say that I think that the treatment for gender dysphoria ever being surgical and, cross-sex hormones, all that sort of stuff is a bad treatment, because I don't think that a treatment for a mental condition that involves surgery and then making greater society believe a lie is a satisfactory treatment for anything. So that's that. Then if I think like, do I want to transgenocide or anything like that? No, I want everybody to be safe. I want everybody to be helped in a actual way that's progressive. And I don't think that how anyone's being helped right now is in any way satisfactory.
Okay, so I'm going to drill down on some of these ideas. So when you say you want people to be safe, like what do you mean by that? Like, do you mean no biological males in women's spaces? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I mean, no biological males in women's spaces, no biological males in female sport, no biological men pressuring lesbians into sleeping with them, no children being told that they're born in the wrong body because they're not. I mean, no person should have to go onto Twitter to have some woman who owns an app to tell them, oh, actually, you can't change biological sex. I mean, that's the medical profession should be telling them that. And these people, they don't realize that it's impossible to change sex. I think that is just so unsafe and horrible that that's happening.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and I'm going to tell you right up front that these are deranged questions. So I'm asking you these questions not because I want to know the answers to them, but because I know for a fact that there are people out there who have these questions and nobody's answered these questions. So my first question to you is, so you don't want biological men in women's spaces. And so, for example, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So you don't want, for example, trans women in women's prisons.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So one of the reasons you don't want trans women in women's spaces is because of a safety issue for the biological women in those spaces. Is that right?
It's one reason, yes, but it's not at all the only reason.
Well, okay, so I'm going to go into the other reasons in a second, but part of the problem with woke people refusing to engage in any kind of a conversation is that you just have to kind of take a guess. You have to kind of infer the way they think based upon the things that they say. And so I'm going to make a series of inferences here that I'm not positive, but I bet that this is going through their heads. So if it's going through a woke person's head that rapes happen in women's prisons anyway. What's the problem with a trans woman raping a woman? I mean, why would a trans woman with a penis be raping a woman worse than the women who get raped by other women? I mean, isn't that itself a form of transphobia to say that you're against trans women rape?
I'm sure that they would try and make it that it is a form of transphobia, but no. So in a woman's prison, you would have women who are a danger to other women be segregated from other women. In the situation of putting men in a women's prison because they say they're a woman, you are essentially rewarding these men for their crimes. So just anyone who would be sort of advocating for that, for a rapist to be put in a woman's prison because he says he's a woman, why put him in prison at all? Essentially, he might actually be safer to women if he's not in there, because he's not in such close proximity, like not in prison at all. I mean, he's not in close proximity to them. It's one of these situations where there's no controversy. There wasn't. I mean, we've had male and female prisons for a long time, and they've worked as well as any prison situation can. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be prison reform. There definitely should be, but this isn't it. Women's prisons were created because women were raped by male prisoners. That was actually like the number one reason. I mean, I'm against male prison guards being there as well. I don't think that there should be male prison guards in a women's prison. I don't think men should be in women's prison in any capacity, but we can't even have that conversation at the moment because it's sidelined because of the conversation about putting male prisoners in there. If you're going to argue for male prisoners to be put in women's prisons, and then one of your big arguments is, oh, well, women rape other women in prison, so this isn't a big deal. Why isn't your greater argument for unisex prisons then?
So you value women's safety, and so that's one of the reasons that you don't want biological males in female spaces. And when you say you don't want male prison guards in female-only spaces, it's not because you harbor some animus against men and that you hate men, so you don't want them there. In fact, no, but I just want to really make this clear to people who are listening. Like, these things should not have to be spelled out, but they are being spelled out.
It's a really valid point, because I don't want male prison guards even in female prisons. And yes, it's not because I hate men. And it's the same thing with, I don't want men who think they're women in women's prisons. It's not because I hate these people. It's because this environment actually works better without them. Right. And so if we're going to look at how to make something better, which I've always thought that that's what progress actually was trying to find ways to make things better, properly better. You would think that it would be the way to go about it.
Yeah, I think they would say, but again, the problem is that they don't value communication, discourse, and dialogue. So we have to infer we have to kind of guess what that they would say, because we don't know, because they won't talk to us. But I think that they would say that that's not better. Better is a kind of systemic remediation of isms and phobia that are baked into the system. So I don't really know what they would say about male guards in female prisoner.
They often use the male prison guard argument when you say you don't want men who say they're women in women's prison, and they'll go, oh, what about the prison guards? And that's when you'll say, well, I want them out too. And there were actually women activists who were working to get that to happen, and it's been completely derailed by this issue, because now they've got to focus on this, because it's actually, if we're talking about what's more needs immediate action, it's getting the rapists out first. and then we'll go to back to the male prison guards. So it's the stuff that was already happening. It's just this is the biggest distraction.
So do you think that? So I've been thinking about a lot of things adjacent to this space for a while. So clearly there are biological differences between men and women, and clearly these biological differences manifest differently in terms of sex organs, in terms of kind of dispositions. Denying that's why they have to be biology denialists, right? Because when you have to deny biology so that so the ideology makes sense at all. Because if you don't, and usually we see this concurrent with evolution denialism as well. And that's why Dawkins on Piers Morgan was recently savaged by the woke mob. But he's operating from a different paradigm. He's operating from facts and evidence, and they're operating from ideology. Okay, so a few things. One question I've had, and then I want to get back to the biological differences. So, what if somebody had been living as a female, had top and bottom surgery on hormones, etc., got convicted of some crime, say, non-sexual crime like I'm sure the legal terms don't translate here. No, something more serious, something like they robbed a bank with a gun. They had no penis. It's time to sentence them. Do you think that, and they've been on hormones for say a decade, should those people be housed with women?
No. And I've got a few reasons why. So first of all, women aren't just like dickless men. We're not just like men plus different hormones. Like, we are our own type of human being. There's two types. There's male and there's female. And so even if you go and have the surgery and go on all of these hormones, you haven't actually changed sex. You've just a man who has cut off body parts, added some cosmetic procedures in, and are taking synthetic hormones. That's all you actually are doing. And it's just shameful that any sort of legal institutions have validated the illusion that means that you change sex, because you don't. I mean, a simple DNA test will prove that individual is still a male. It's like a cheek swab will do it. And so, in a, say, prison situation, you might have somebody that is prison for, so say, like the bank robbery situation, or you could have somebody that's in there because of fraud or any completely non-violent offense, who suddenly says that they're a woman and be moved to the women's prison. Now, even if they could be the loveliest person on the planet and actually wish no harm to women, actually, you get to the next context, it's irrelevant. So this is why I say safety is only one part of it. Because the next part of it is you've got women who actually might be recovering from male violence. And so then you've got a male person there, and then they're suddenly like, oh, I'm not comfortable in this situation, even if it's someone that's never going to hurt them. Next part of it is that person who this non-violent, actually lovely person who says that they're a woman, to call them a woman and she, and you're in prison and you have no choice about that. Now, anytime you don't call that person a she, you're going to get in trouble for it. This individual suddenly has a lot of control over you. That person has more control over you than any other prisoner. That person also has control over the prison guards, because if anyone misgenders that person, they're in trouble. I think that we're just giving people so much power over other people because acknowledge basic reality right in front of them. They're going to be in trouble for it. It's ultimately, I don't even really need to get into arguments about safety or anything like that to defend my position on this. It's basic truth. Either human beings are allowed to acknowledge reality as they see it, or they're not. It's as simple as that. And if you can't, whether you're incarcerated or not, if you can't say that's a man, you're not a free person.
Okay, so I have two questions. You said that I can't remember the exact phrase, but women are their own kind of thing, right? And men are their own kind of thing. What is the kind of thing that women are that differ from the kind of thing that men are?
On a biological level, we've got male and female, and it's like a body plan of how you're developed. From every cell in your body is just male or female. How your bones are developed, how just everything. I mean, we're just different. I mean, this was so non-controversial to say 10 minutes ago. The only reason it's become a controversial thing to say, or we even have to sit and have conversations like this, is because men are saying that they're women. That's the only reason. I mean, it's one of the things I say to people all the time, when they say like trans women are women, like that's the mantra. I'm like, they're the ones eliminating the transness there. Like that actually seems like a transphobic statement to me, because why can't we be in this environment where we're going like, oh, there's a certain group of people that really do feel like they're the opposite sex. And these people who feel like they're the opposite sex are called transgender people. And they want to exist as a class of people as transgender. And I'd be like, well, okay. Rights they're taking away from anybody else. There's, they don't want to be in women's sports if they're male. And this is how it was for quite a while, in fact, with transsexuals. They knew who they were. They weren't lied to. They knew that they were what their biological reality was. And then they just sort of existed in the world. And then it got co-opted by what we're dealing with now. So it all comes back to the fact that that things are being pushed through and we're supposed to be taking them seriously. But it's a lie. The whole thing is a lie. So if you sit there and talk about safety, you're talking about the safety of a situation that is based on a lie to begin with. Why do we have to take it seriously at all?
So I have two questions. So two questions. When you're talking to someone who's a trans male or woman, and they say, I'm a he or I'm a she, do you personally use those pronouns?
No. And with friends that I've met, it's the great irony of when you're in this debate that you actually meet more trans people than you ever had before. And I've become friends with many people who say that they're trans. And I am just completely honest to them. I say, first of all, you don't use pronouns in one-on-one conversation with somebody. But I say, I will not use your preferred pronouns or whatever when I'm not around you, because friendships are based on mutual respect. And I'm just not going to be friends with somebody who's going to tell me how I can speak. And that has nothing to do with them being trans. I wouldn't be friends with anybody who told me how I had to speak. So if they're going to tell me how to speak, I'm just not going to be friends with that person.
All right, so talk me through this, because I did a show criticizing roughly the analog of the ABC in the United States, which is called NPR, which is a cesspool of wokeness. And in those conversations, I did it with one of my best friends and my jiu-jitsu coach, Matt Thornton. And I always use the pronouns, provided that they're not weird, like, he's or she's. So talk me through, and I know you're not universalizing what you do to me or to anyone else, but I got a massive amount of grief from that. But talk me through why you think I should not do that, if you think at all I should not do that, because it just seems to me like a minimal courtesy that doesn't import the social norms, regarding rape centers and prisons and sports. Or am I missing something?
Very much missing something. So
okay, talk me through it then.
Now, obviously,
please.
Obviously, anybody is free to speak however they want. I mean, that's essentially one of my points that I'm making, and why you shouldn't be forced to use preferred pronouns. We didn't start, this movement didn't start with media reporting on her penis. So there was one in the New York Post today, her testicles. It didn't start that way. Or, women having the man who raped her on trial and her having to refer to him as a she. It didn't start with that. This whole thing started with be kind with your friends, and it spread through that way. And it's a manipulation on our empathy. Now, when you say, like, it's out of a kindness, a compassion, or a courtesy, that a man is a she, if that's what he wants to be called. Doing that and being kind and courteous to that person, it's actually being incredibly rude and offensive to all women, because we're not men and men aren't women. And so by even giving one person just that little bit of validation that they are a woman, it does become a harder position to then go, oh, hang on, no, here's my line. No, I'll call you a she.
Okay,
but you can't use the female-only space.
So do you think that that's a too nuanced of a stance for people to take? Because that would require another level of thinking about, I wouldn't say a complex issues, because I don't think it's particularly complex, but it would require another level of abstraction that we as a society are not capable of. Like that you could both call someone a different pronoun, and that doesn't mean that they're afforded rights of that sex. Like if you knew, I guess it's, go ahead.
Well, the thing is that once you sort of bring any of this language into public life, which is where it's going to happen, because as I said before, when you're in a one-on-one conversation with a person, you don't use pronouns with them. I've not called you a he once in this conversation. So it would only be when I'm talking about you externally, or if there was a third person in the room and I was referencing you, potentially maybe, but I'm still not talking to you. It is dictating how I'm talking about a person to another person, whether they're in the room or not. And so once you bring that into any form of public life, you're going to have an absolute nightmare of a situation that happens really quickly, because as we've seen happening, all legal language, all institutions are going to have to make the decision. Are they going to be courteous to these people or not? And then if they're not courteous to these people, they're horrible, they're bigoted, evil organizations. And then they're utterly punished for it. And so they give into it. And then women for years are over here going, hi, can someone please listen to us? Because this is affecting us. All of this courtesy everybody thought they were doing is making us look like bigots, because we're saying no to men in female spaces of these men who everyone else is calling she, and we can clearly see they're not. And I mean, where's the line? Is it a man who has had a lot of medicalization, so he superficially kind of appears like a woman, so you call him she, but not somebody who's just self-IDing with no intervention? Then you've got activists who will say that well, that's transphobic there. You'll never win. There's nothing you can do to keep this group happy. If you'll be like, well, I'm giving you this tiny little bit, and they'll be like, but that's not enough, because we want you to do it for everybody, and we want that man in a female space, and we want him running against women in the Olympics. And so you go, oh, but hang on, but I was just trying to be kind. And that's where you sit there and have to unpack. This ideology has affected and taken hold of my empathy, and trying to unravel that is really difficult. It's hard. I had a struggle with it. I didn't start out in all of this, just this like going around going no to preferred pronouns. I won't say them in any circumstances. I did try. I did what I was told. And it was only through actually learning more about what was happening and seeing all of the evidence of what was happening to women, experiencing it myself, that I went, I am being asked to be kind to this group at the expense of kindness to myself and my demographic and truth in general. I mean, I am in a situation at the moment, like a legal situation, and it's. Hold on one second. I'm reading pronouns. Yeah.
Okay, let me drill down that. So it's at your expense because of the consequences of referring to that person as their preferred pronoun. Like if it were somehow insulated from that, there would be no consequence. Or are you saying it's impossible to insulate it?
It's impossible to, because you were saying before, like, would it require some sort of nuance? No, I mean, with all of language, like, when we're really speaking specifically about the English language here, because it's actually less gendered than other languages. I mean, this is really difficult in other languages, and there's
like Spanish.
yeah, there's some countries that can be a little bit inoculated from this because of that, because they're going to have to invent words or whatever. Yeah. But so in English, it's like, no, like the nuance is just going back to how we've always been. I mean, this was never a struggle. It's never, no one's ever had to sit there going like, oh, okay, I'll have to call that one, some person she's and not he. It's just, I think it's a complete fabrication that that this is sort of this really big challenge for society to deal with. That means that gender ideology is legitimate in some way. It's not.
Is the reason, so let's say that, so, you know, we're here down in Australia. Did I tell you, by the way, the first time I was in Australia a few years ago, the first thing I did I tell you this? I don't think this is the first time. This is the first time we've ever spoken. Well, you know, I immediately got off the plane and I went into the bathroom and I filled the sink up with water and I wanted to see if the water went the other way.
The first time I went to America, I did the same thing.
Did you really?
Yeah,
oh, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Simpsons.
Yeah. It's I can assure people it's a myth. So I think it has more to do with the sink basin and a bunch of other stuff. So
yeah.
So I'm trying to think. So like, let's say that somebody is out there and they're like, you know, I don't know, maybe they have some kind of a profession, which I can't imagine what it would be. Like they're just completely isolated from anything. Maybe they're on a manufacturing line or something. I don't know what it would be. But why should anybody care about any of this? Like, who gives a shit? Like, why should anybody care about women and men and pronouns and spaces and hormones and gender ideology and gender affirming care? Like, why should anybody care about any of it?
I mean, why should anybody care about free speech? Why should anybody care about being able to say the truth, the freedom of belief? I mean, these are really important things. And that's what's ultimately being attacked here. Because you might work in a profession where, say, it really doesn't seemingly impact you in any way, or no, any obvious way. Cool. But then voice your opinion about it, or ask some questions about it and see what happens.
Yeah. So I'll answer my own question. So I think it's deeper than free speech. I think it's much deeper than free speech. I think it comes down to a question of cognitive liberty, whether or not we can have the liberty to form beliefs about things. And the mechanism of control is through regulation of speech, but it's attempting to change the way people think about things. And I guess part of the problem, I always come back to this at some level, it's always resonant in my mind. Like, that's why you need to place your epistemology, what you know, how you know, before anything else. Like, I'm thinking about this law, I think it was in Uganda, that they passed, basically criminalizing anybody who is, you know, claims to be gay or is gay or what have you. And I can
deemed to be gay, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think about this a lot. I think about, okay, so clearly, so to me, and I think it's rationally drivable that this is an obvious problem, but you also want nations, I just learned, pronounce the word SOVERIGNTY.
What did you say? What did you say?
SOVERIGNTY.
Sovereignty, did you spell?
Yeah, yesterday I did a bunch of things. Everyone's talking about sovereignty. I'm like, what the fuck I never even heard the word sovereignty, but evidently but you didn't pronounce it like that.
No.
So you want nations to be sovereign and to have their sovereignty. But there are some pretty deranged things, like the Taliban denying women education and this whole criminalization of. And so the question is, like, to what extent ought we in society to to place cognitive liberty front and center if we know that there are examples in the world of people doing some pretty horrific things. And I wouldn't say women are necessarily a minority because they're 50% of the population, but some pretty horrific things to groups of people. And I'm just kind of, you don't have to comment on this. I'm just kind of meandering. I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
Yeah, but I mean,
like,
if you take
yeah.
If you take countries like Uganda or then like Afghanistan, these aren't countries that have any form of freedom of belief. These horrible laws and restrictions they're placing upon people is because they don't have it, because they're not letting people have cognitive freedom. I thought we lived in a society of cognitive freedom. I've always lived my life thinking that, and to a point we always did until all of this started. I mean, you'd have someone would say something and there would be pushback or things, or there's some say like belief systems that we have said, no, that's really beyond the, like say like Nazism. Let's take that.
Right.
Because that's the one at the moment, especially. But it is also the one that we all decided and all agreed upon that's the one. You keep that away. If you believe in that, you have no part in society, because it isn't healthy for society to have that belief in it.
So I guess
so
that's the question. What are the limits of cognitive liberty? But I'll just throw that out there because it's something I've been thinking. So, the other thing that you said that was interesting. So there are differences between men and women. Men have different proclivities. I think it was Steve Stewart Williams that tweeted something out a study that I just found so interesting. And it was, and if you don't want to comment on this, you obviously have no idea what I'm going to say. I don't want to ambush you with this, but only 10% of women want to have sex as much as the average man. and I just found that to be, so let's accept by fiat that that's true. Let's just run with the assumption that's true. One of the commenters on this is that you have a lot of men who are sexually frustrated. And I have a friend of mine whose buddy married a trans woman because he wanted to have more frequent intimate relations with her. I don't know if you want to know the pronoun thing, or with this trans woman. With this conversation is already complicated enough.
You can say whatever you want.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just trying to be precise here. And so, given that different people have different sexes have different proclivities, men have different proclivities, different desires. It seems to me to make the water muddier when you add trans women and trans men into a mix. And for example, if you were to study that phenomenon, like if trans women are women, then they would be just classified as women. They wouldn't even be a trans modifier. And then you would study the phenomenon. Yeah, go ahead.
Because, and as your friend is showing, in the behavior doesn't change. Men behave like men no matter what they call themselves, and women behave like women. I mean, there's a reason why trans men aren't out here trying to force themselves into things, because women aren't known for doing that. It's not, men are much more forceful. Women are not. And whether that's a socialization or whether that's like a natural, just sort of like a biological element of us, and lots of people have different opinions. But, men aren't being forced to believe that trans men are men in the same way that women are being forced, or everyone's being forced to believe that trans women are women.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, that's super interesting, isn't it? And Andrew Sullivan, I read Andrew Sullivan's comment, and he said that women are the ones who put the brakes on male sexuality. And I thought that was really, it never occurred to me before. That's why I think diversity in that sense is different, because people bring those different kind of views about things that one would not have thought. And I mean, I guess what I'm thinking about in the back of my mind, I don't even know if any of this is making any sense, but I'm just thinking about, like, if I were to try to figure out what's true, like if I were to figure out what's true, I would want to research this using the best available methods, using rigorous kind of scholarship, trying to falsify what's out there. And the problem I find in these conversations is that we have no bodies of literature that we can rely upon which we can anchor these conversations, and we can each be pointing to data that people have tried to falsify in journals, because the journals themselves are instruments of ideological capture to inform public policy, to push conspicuous narratives. And I'm trying to think about how somebody would attempt to navigate these issues in a way that's not merely grounded in common sense, but evidence-based. And because I know that someone listening to this conversation is going to think to themselves, well, why should I listen to these two? I mean, why should... Mm-hmm. And the problem is, any kind of evidence that we would cite for anything, if there would be evidence about it at all, would all be not all, but would overwhelmingly likely be subject to journals and university systems that have themselves fallen to the ideology. And it makes it very difficult to navigate these kinds of conversations that are already very difficult. Does that make sense?
Yes. So I've had a few instances of that. So one of them, when I was pregnant, and I hate all of the ideological language. And so when I would go online to research different things, either about pregnancy, or, just about new motherhood. So I had never had a baby before. I had no idea what I was in for. I actually found that I had to read articles that were published prior to 2017, because anything after that, it was pregnant person, birthing person. And I just didn't want to read it. I was like, I hate it. Because as soon as I see those words, I actually think, why should I believe anything else you're saying? I immediately think they're going to say other lies.
Right, because that's just a signature. There's an underlying epistemology that's inherently untrustworthy because it's the result of a process that's inherently ideological, so it shouldn't be trusted.
Yes, and then the other thing is...
Yeah.
Thing is that they should, people, trans activists use this all the time as a sort of gotcha. They'll have these YouGov polls or something like that, where they'll be like, see, more women think that trans women are women than men. And you're like, do you think it's women saying that? Anyone can call themselves a woman. Why are we now going, oh, it's more women? So they want the biological reality to be important there to make their point, that it's women saying that men are women. And so I just assume at this point that any data that's saying more women think trans women are women is just more men who think they're women are saying men are women. So it's nonsense.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question that could lead to an uncomfortable inference. So did you see what are you smoking there?
A vape.
Are you getting high?
No, just nicotine. Yeah, no. I don't smoke weed. I don't have anything like that. It's just nicotine's my thing. I love it. I gave it up for 9 months, and knowing full well that I would start again. When I was pregnant,
really?
Sometimes the only thing I craved, I would sometimes get the smell of nicotine stuck in my nose.
Really?
And I'd be like, oh God, I need it.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow, that's super interesting to me. That's another podcast entirely. That's another podcast entirely. Okay, so did you see the clip of Drew Barrymore on her knees?
Yeah.
Did you see that?
I will say, preface it by saying she quite often does get on her knees for guests, so it wasn't unusual in that respect because she is sort of like a bit all over the place and bows down to lots of guests. Like there's clips of her doing the same thing to Kate Hudson, for example. But it was this particular instance took it to a whole new level because the person she was interviewing was specifically there talking about how he's for 365 days he's been a woman, and that's what she was celebrating on her knees. And it was so it was like lots of women had such a visceral reaction to it because while we're out here fighting tooth and nail to make sure that laws are either changed so that they protect women or laws aren't changed to put women into danger, or just that, basic truths, blah, blah, blah. And knowing that some of the women who are affected by this the most and first are poor women because they're the ones who need domestic violence shelters or rape centers or, women in prison. And then you've got this movie star on her knees that's going to be seen by millions of people and making everything we do so much harder because we're the biggest.
Okay, so just come along this little 2-minute road trip with me here.
Mm-hmm.
So she's on her knees. I'm even uncomfortable saying this, but I'm just going to say it anyway. She's literally on her knees, which I'll bracket what kind of inferences one can make about that, to a man who is performing, to use the borrowed term from Judith Butler, performing gender. And I guess my question, is uncomfortable as it is to you, is do you think that there's something not merely in the culture, but something in the biological nature of women that taps into the subservience to men?
So when you look at like biological realities of the differences between men and women, there are some just uncomfortable truths. Like, I don't love that men are stronger and faster than us and better at sports. I wish that we were all the same. It sucks, but it is just the reality. And so then when you look at it as well in this kind of behavior, and that say that there are women who will bow down
genuflect
to it more, more, should we say, and you've got to then process the uncomfortable truth of that. Now, I actually think that it's a survival mechanism. I think that women all know that because men are stronger, physically stronger than us, we'd make lots of decisions to make sure that we are not put in the harm's way of that in our everyday lives. And one of them is sometimes agreeing with things that we don't actually agree to. Now, at the moment, when you see it's out, there's tries they might to make people not see it, women who have at least seen glimpses of what happens to women when they say no to this ideology. They are then physically threatened or professionally threatened, what have you.
Right.
They make the decision, I don't want that. I don't want to put myself in that situation.
Okay, so traveling further down this path then. So we're not talking about someone who's made the decision to say no to this. We're talking about someone who got on her knees in front of both a studio audience. I don't even know how many times that clip was viewed. I have no idea, but I would guess in the tens of millions. Right, at least millions. Is there something that you find particularly, I don't want to say a betrayal, that's not, the sentiment is there, but it's not exactly the right word, but is there something that you find about because I'm watching that as a straight cis hetero guy, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, like.
Yeah, I felt really sad.
Wow.
I felt really sad.
So that's what I was getting at. So your emotional response to that was sadness.
Yeah, it really was, because I thought the women, like whether it's Drew Barrymore or other women who are maybe more not so literally getting on their knees for these men, but they're doing all but that. I get sadness a lot if I talk to them or if I hear what they're saying about other women. But
Right.
it is safer. It is a safer choice for women to throw other women under the bus than it is to throw men under the bus. It just is.
Yeah, so I wonder if there is not some vestige of evolution operating in our interactions. Like you said, maybe there's a safety module, or I wonder if there's just more that's going on there that has allowed this ideology to metastasize to the extent that it has.
I think that for this ideology, specific, because they're pushing it as the men are women. That's what they lead with. They very rarely bring up trans men at all, like women who think they're men. I mean, really, they're only ever celebrated when they're pregnant. So how gender dysphoric are these people? But so they're pushing men or women. Now, the only way that could take hold in society in any way is if some women believe it. So they go to the women who they know well.
So correct me if I'm wrong. So I've often said that because nobody is against, as far as I know, I could be totally wrong about this, but as far as I know, nobody is against trans men in men's sports. At least I haven't heard anybody, if there are some. And so if that's the case, then if that's true, let's assume that it is, then the term transphobic wouldn't apply. The term transphobic would only apply if you were against trans people in any sports. But because you're only against trans women in women's sports, then something else has to be operative there that's not transphobia. Is my reasoning?
100%. I mean, I didn't know this until I got into this debate, but men's sport actually kind of isn't men's sport. It is an open category.
Right.
It's just that, unfortunately, women cannot compete in the same level as men. You just have to look at the times of races, of world records, of what the woman who comes in 8th and what the man who comes in 1st and what the man who comes in 8th are. You just look at the times. You look at the times of male high school athletes, like the really good ones, and women athletes, like Olympians, and you see it.
Okay, so this is important. So we know that these differences exist, and this is empirical. It's an experiment that we could run, and we have run over and over again. Like you would have to be in a level of reality denying, but let's just bracket the reality denying in it for a second and say, okay, so there are biological realities. They manifest themselves physically, and in the particular context of sports, we know that these have different yields. Track, MMA, what have you. So given that that's the case, what argument or what reason would you give somebody if I made the following claim? Okay. So we know that there are differences. So we're gonna pretend we'll do the role playing. So we know that there are differences between men and women. I'll acknowledge that. We know that these differences manifest themselves in sports, but so what? What's the big deal if men are consistently winning sport? Why does that? Who cares? I mean, isn't the most fair way, because I'm interested in fairness, so isn't the most fair way to just throw everybody in the same category and let them have at it?
Well,
what would the argument against that be?
I'd say you do care. You care about men winning. Or if we were just to make it that all sports were just an open category, female category doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I want to see the best person win, regardless of their equipment.
So it's a woman, if she does happen to, maybe occasionally there'd be one woman in a race, and so it's just the best person who wins. Why would any woman ever try? Unless you are genetically gifted, like Usain Bolt, for all of the training and obviously work he put into it, he was also genetically gifted. Michael Phelps was genetically gifted. So on top of that was there. And so unless a woman was so genetically gifted that this aberration came in and could actually compete and be competitive with men, we're just watching men's sports. It's just women's sports is gone. It's just eliminated.
Right.
So we don't have Serena Williams anymore.
Right. So, okay. So I'm with you. And we should care that women's sports would be gone because why? Because it's unfair to women.
If we want to have an equal society where men and women can participate in all different sorts of things in society.
But what if we don't want that?
Well, if we don't
what if we don't want? Because we seem to not want it now. When men win women's beauty pageants, I mean, when men consistently win Women of the Year awards, I mean, it seems that we don't want that kind of society.
No, it's not true at all. It seems that I think it's actually reinforced that we do want that kind of society. They're just saying that they want men to be able to go into the women's categories. They're not wanting to eliminate the categories. They're wanting the categories to be in there. The categories are very important for the validation of this, because if you don't have those categories, then what is even trans? What's the point of it? Because if we're just saying anybody can live, and anybody can, in this day and age, a man can wear a dress. I have no problem with this. Wear makeup, present yourself however you want. I think that is really healthy. I think that's actual progress. And if we were having a movement right now that men should be able to appear in stereotypically feminine ways, I am on that side. I think that's great. However, the only way transgenderism exists in any way meaningful in this world is if there are categories, because that's what they're identifying into. So a man can exist walking down the street dressed as a woman in a normal, metropolitan environment. He'll have very little pushback about it. Maybe a few looks here and there because people are still getting used to it. But he's going to be able to do it. You see it all the time now. But he needs to be able to have that women's space or that women's sport to be able to force his way into, to validate that he's actually a woman. Otherwise, he's just a man wearing a dress, which he still is, but he needs the validation for it. So those categories are more important to those people than almost anybody else.
Okay, so one thing I've been thinking about and struggling with, my friend Douglas Murray has written about this. There are so many problems that we face now. I just moved out of Portland, which probably the best thing that ever happened to me. That place is just, oh my goodness.
I mean,
that's another podcast.
I lived in West Hollywood for 8 years. I wouldn't be able to live there now.
Yeah, that's where my buddy Reed, who's here now, Reed and I go everywhere together. Everybody thinks Reed and I are gay, by the way. We're constantly asked if we're gay. My new Reed is over there laughing. I say, yes, we are. And then everybody's a little nicer to us. We have so many problems: homelessness, drug addiction. My friend Michael Schellenberger ran for governor of California, and unfortunately that's another story. My other friend co-ran his campaign, Melissa Chen, and it was utterly fascinating to me, the issues that Schellenberger ran on. And I just honestly, I got to say, and I'm going to get to my point in a second, but I think the people of California deserve what they get. I mean, they voted in Newsom. They deserve, there's a democracy. They're going to get, people of Portland, they voted in Ted Wheeler. You get what you deserve. If you don't like it, don't vote him in. But anyway, my point is, homelessness, drug addiction, deficits, war with Ukraine, Chinese hegemony, Taiwan. I could go on, banking crisis, but there's no point for me to go on. Why is it, given the actual problems that we face in the world, and the Poles are now sending jets to Ukraine, which is a significant, and I'm totally pro-Ukraine. I'm totally for the sovereignty. I'm totally for the sovereignty of nations, and I'm obviously against mass murder and mass deportations and kidnappings and torture.
Yep, same.
But I just thought I'd say that for the record. So why is it that this issue, which shouldn't even be truly in the top 1,000 of issues, I mean, it shouldn't even be in the 10,000s of issues. We've saw this is not a complicated issue. You can present any way you want, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
There are some things that are a little more complicated around the edges about, payments when you're ward of the state, stuff like that. But why is it that people have latched onto this issue as opposed to literally the thousands of other issues that they could have latched onto, but they have not?
Great distraction, isn't it? Go and have all of the people over there fighting about really obvious things. Go and have them fighting about whether men can be women. I mean, this is the stupidest conversations I've ever had. I can't even believe
it's remarkable,
that I have any.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I have some sort of notoriety in my country now because I said women don't have a penis. It's the stupidest sentence I've ever said. But it's a great distraction. Like, we're all over here fighting about it. What's happening while we're not looking? I think about it all the time. What's going on? Because this seems
but
too
that's not
perfect.
an intentional thing. It's not like a conspiracy where people kind of got together to, hey, the gold standard, the dollar is no longer going to be in the world's reserve or whatever. It's not like people, there's some kind of Illuminati out there.
No, I don't
everybody's
think there
a
is
marionette, and they, that they.
It's a perfect storm. I think what happened. It's just a perfect storm of things happening.
I just can't believe how stupid this is. I mean, this is just the fucking stupidest thing ever, and I find it taking up. I mean, the whole woke movement is just one idiocy after another, and I'm always amazed at how much thought and really smart people this takes up when we could actually be doing something meaningful.
I literally, in 2019, we were developing it, launched in 2020, just an app for women to use, to find roommates, freelance work, just to connect with and talk online. It was just an app for women. I knew that there'd be a little bit of pushback because, there's always a group of men going, why do women need anything? But I thought we'd be like, oh, whatever, it would be like just negligible. I had no idea. I didn't know about this issue before that. So I didn't do what I'm doing in response to it at all. I thought that it was so non-controversial to say that you can tell if someone's male or female by looking at them, because we all have since the beginning of, animals do it. Like we all know, who is male or female. And so it was just so crazy to me when I suddenly found myself in this chaos where I was being called transphobic, being called a bigot, now a Nazi, because I simply just am saying that men are not women. It is so stupid. I wish that I could talk about everything else.
If all the people, listen, if all the people calling you Nazi, I share a little something personal. So I had adopted a girl from China at 2.5. She was a waiting child. So she had disabilities. And, one of the things that in the culture war, people are telling me, that I'm sexually abusive to her, that I'm beating her up, that she's Asian, that I forced her to do my laundry. And I hear all of this, and I think to myself, if all of those people who are calling everybody Nazis all the time, all they would really need to do is stop calling people Nazis and pick up trash by the side of the road. Like, do something that's actually productive to help society.
Yeah.
And stop spreading just this vitriol. I also
just quickly on that, in Australia, 10 days ago now, the neo-Nazis showed up in Melbourne at a women's rally event.
Right.
And the press has now spent almost 2 weeks calling women Nazis and going after women about this and punishing us. The actual Nazis have had very little pushback.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
I'm like, there were actual Nazis there. They could have arrested them. They could have done anything.
Neo-Nazis. Yeah.
They did nothing to these men. But it's astounding to me.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing is, I mean, it's like this show Sliders. You're probably too young for that, but these
No, I
basically
remember it.
these
Yeah.
people, they had a device and they slid into a parallel world. That's how I'm constantly thinking that I'm sliding into ever more deranged realities in which people have completely forget moral triage. They have no concept of anything. And meanwhile, I think it was Douglas who said that the barbarians are at the gate with nuclear weapons. People trying to sneak nuclear bombs and everything. There's a good thing on the Babylon Bee about the Chinese army defeating the Americans by misgendering them, by calling them the wrong pronoun. I mean, I do think that there is a kind of what's next is the question. I think what's next is the complete inability when something bad actually happens for people to deal with it. And then for the system to not be able to handle the response from the kind of fragility that we have intentionally, and I use that word on purpose, that we've intentionally instilled in people.
Yeah.
I don't know. The road ahead is fraught with so many dangers, and we have
I'm actually really optimistic about it.
Yeah. Long term or short term?
Long term, I'm optimistic.
I am long term as well, not short term.
All of this stuff is such nonsense. There's just no way you can get all people to believe it, like democratically. You just can't. But also, all of this stuff, it's very much exists in sort of like a fad, and fads have a life cycle of about 7 years. And so, I think that this is definitely going on a little bit longer than 7 years, but I think even if we went for a generational sort of thing, like there are all of these young people right now, with their stupid pronouns and they're, denying me, like blah, blah, blah. The next kids are going to come along and think they're just the old uncool people. Like pronouns are the most uncool thing ever. And I get really sad and scared about that in the sense that I can't fathom what it will be like when you're sitting there and you've done all these things to your body and you're no longer stunning and brave. You're no longer celebrated. You're yesterday's news because we've moved on to the next fad. The fall from that is going to be horrible. And I have a lot of sympathy for those people.
Yeah, I would hope that people would reason the way through the idea that this is deranged as opposed to it becoming uncool, but I'll take what I can get. Okay, was there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask you, or
no, not really. I think that really, I think in conversations like this, I think the most important thing to take away from them is that, first of all, we started when we were talking about the language and the preferred pronouns. This is an ideology that attacks language, and so actually upholding language is the most important thing with it. And then
I agree, by the way, I agree completely. And I've screamed about that from the rooftops for years. I totally agree.
And then I think that, the other really important thing is, when we say why is this an important issue? And we can obviously mock how nonsense it is all of the time. And it is, but the real world consequences of it are huge. I mean, I'm in litigation right now because I have told someone that I don't believe that this person is a woman, and I'm right about that. But the law is not necessarily 100% on my side. And so people need to be aware that laws have been changed in stealth. I mean, we went to, Supreme Court rulings, or in Australia, it was a plebiscite to get gay marriage into law, something that should have really been quite just done. You know what I mean? It shouldn't have put people through what they had to go through to get it. But the democratic process at least did happen. But with gender ideology, the laws have been changed and we didn't know about it. I didn't know that in Australia, women were removed from the Sex Discrimination Act. Like when I was 100%. When I was creating a platform for women, it never once occurred to me to go, should I just check in law to see if men are considered women? That's an irrational thought. It never entered my mind. But it turns out they are. Who knew? Like they did this.
That's why it's
100%.
It's so important to change the moral mind If you don't work to change the moral mind, then anytime like Chris Rufo or somebody brings a lawsuit, the people will be in the orbit of the ideology. And so judges, juries, so you'll actually make it worse by setting up a system of precedents that works against you. So
exactly. And I think, Lionel Shriver actually summed this up so well one time. She said that, the problem with progress is that you can sort of progress forward into a ditch. Like, it is actually really important that we all should want progress. I want progress, but we've got to make sure that it's actual progress, that we're not just falling into a ditch. And I think right now we are. We're just being told people are being told it's progressive or it's kind, and they go, okay, I'll go along with it. Busy lives. There's other things that they care more about. And they don't realize that their most basic rights have actually been completely taken away from them. And you might think that this doesn't affect you, but then, as I said, go and try and question it at work and see what happens. It's not going to end well for you. And that's not a free society. And so at the moment you realize that you're not living in a completely free society, it gets really, really scary, and other things can actually seem insignificant by comparison, like the economy or something can seem insignificant. So I think it is I think it is actually the issue of the time right now, because we have to fight for truth. And we didn't think that we'd have to fight for it in this stupid way, but we do.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Where can people reach you?
So I'm on Twitter at Sal Tweets. It's 2 L's because I spell my own name wrong. It's a long story starting from when I was 4. I'm on Twitter, and then so we'll be launching our new women's only platform very soon, and then we're also very soon launching our crowdfunder to help us do a constitutional challenge to get women back in the Sex Discrimination Act in Australia, which is very important, obviously.
Well, you have your hands full, and you have a new baby.
I do. Yes, I swear her first.
Congratulations.
Her first words are going to be "men are not women" because it's all she hears.
Wow, that's great. All right, so hey, thank you so much for talking. Don't hang up yet because Reed's got to do Reed things.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for talking. I'm sorry I couldn't make it up there to the Gold Coast to meet you and your partner, but
all good.
Maybe another day, maybe another time.
All good. Thank you so much. It's been so fun.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for watching. Everything we do is under the umbrella of the National Progress Alliance, nationalprogressalliance.org. It's a nonprofit, independent 501c3. Your generous donations keep us going and keep fueling content like this. So please help us out. Make a donation. We very much appreciate it. Thank you.